Okay, so I tell a lot of people about startups, and some people don't like it, and some people they're very enthusiastic about it. But one thing I get a lot from those enthusiastic people is that they want to do a startup, but they just don't have any ideas. Now, that's a very common problem. Luckily, the founder of Y Combinator, Paul Graham, the legendary PG, made an essay about it. It's pretty good, decently long, but if you have the time, read it in the description below. But I'll give you a summary of it. Firstly, you shouldn't try to think of startup ideas right off the bat. That usually leads to some wacky outcome. You should actually just try to think of problems. Because problems, once they're solved, people would pay money for that. The best kind of problems, out of all the kind of problems that there could be, are the problems that you have yourself. Because if you have it yourself, then it's more likely to exist. The best companies come at the intersection of three circles. It's something that the founders want, that they themselves can build, and that is overlooked by the rest of the industry. And that is the starting story of Microsoft, Google, Apple, so on, so on. But that's not enough. Which problems should you work on? How do you know a problem is good? Well, I'll draw a graph for you. On the x-axis, we'll put the distribution of all the people in the world. And on the y-axis, we'll put the severity of the problems that they face. And then let's just flip it. Google would look like a gigantic crater because so many people use it. And the problem is pretty important. Just imagine you couldn't use Google for a day. You'd go crazy. So a startup can't really look towards doing that right at the beginning. You need to look for problems with a smaller area. So then you have a choice between two strategies. The first one, going wide but shallow. This is a bad idea. Shallow means that the problem isn't severe, so you probably won't get people paying you for it and you won't make money. But even though it seems so obvious from this graph, loads of people come up with ideas that fall under this category. And sometimes it logically makes sense to them. Social media for pets, the meme startup idea. It sounds stupid, but it might make sense if you think through it. There's 1 billion pet owners worldwide, and if you get 1% of that, that's 10 million people. Sell targeted ads and products, and you could make a fair amount of money. But does that mean that that's a great, profitable, incredible idea? No. There's no urgency or real need. No one cares, and you're still a brokey. And the real insidious nature of problems like these is that you ask your buddies if they would want this. And they might say, yeah, that sounds cool. And so you spend hours making it, and then you show it to them, and they might think it's cool. They might say, yeah, well done for making this, and use it for a little bit. But then they probably won't switch from Instagram or Facebook because these things already do fix the problem so well. And it's just not urgent enough to warrant any money to be spent. So yeah, you might feel a bit sad about that. But don't worry, because now you know that good problems are narrow but deep. Because deep means that the problem is severe and you make money from it. And you don't have to always stay narrow. If you want any chance of becoming massive, then you start narrow and you have the ability to grow wider. For example, Facebook, it was exclusive to Harvard students, but then it branched out to other colleges in the USA. And even then, it was exclusive to 18 to the 20-year-olds in university. But then, once it gained enough traction, it went all around the globe. And so, see how it just went in steps, growing and growing. But how do you become someone who finds the right ideas? You need to be the right kind of person who finds good ideas. And that's the cold hard truth. And so, how do you become the right person? Well, you have to be at the edge of a field. And that doesn't just mean performing at the edge, it also means using at the edge of the field. So, someone performing at the edge of a field, in programming would be the best competitive programmer, for example. But even someone like Mark Zuckerberg, who isn't the greatest programmer of all time, made loads of money. And that's because he was at the edge of social media use at his time. And it takes roughly 1 year to get to understand like where and how an industry works and get to the edge. That sounds like a long time to invest, but a startup takes 3 to 5 years to reach some real traction. So in reality, that's a pretty good investment. The founder of Gmail, Paul Buchheit, says this: the best founders live in the future. What does he mean by that? How do you become a cyborg like me in this picture? Well, most people, they stay in the status quo and they're fine with it. They don't see problems with it. And in fact, they'll just brute force through all the friction that they face in their daily lives. People who live on the future, and on the other hand, see how life should be, see what problems should be solved, and they work towards that. And those missing steps in between are great startup ideas. So the essence really becomes live in the future and build what's missing. Now, there's certain filters in your mind that you want to turn on and off, even after getting to this stage. Firstly, of course, you want to turn on the filter for what's missing, because what's missing is probably going to be something that the world needs. Another filter you want to turn on is competition. Now, this scares people at the start when they're learning about startups and coming up with their first ideas. Competition is actually a good thing, and it's very rare for startups to lose mainly because of competition. Startups actually lose mainly due to their founders messing up. Competition actually shows that there's actually real need in the market and that people are trying to come up with solutions to existing problems. One thing that you should be wary of is that there's no lock-in. So at the enterprise level, if you're trying to create enterprise software, you will generally see a huge lock-in from the big guys trying to keep all of those big companies on their product. You just want to make sure that there's enough urgency for your potential users to switch from the existing solution to your one. The next one are the unsexy ideas. Everyone wants to create the next Facebook, the next Twitter, the thing that will have billions of users. It will make you famous. You'll be world renowned. But there are often better ideas lurking around that just aren't as sexy as those ones. And those maybe were much better. There are random insurance companies that are worth 4 or 5 times more than what Twitter is worth. And yet you never know their names. So in terms of business, if you want to make money, don't underrate the unsexy ideas. Now, one of the biggest filters that you want to turn on is the SHLEP filter. Find SHLEP problems. SHLEP just means tedious, tiring, boring, and hard problems. And Stripe faced this. Stripe is an online payments company, and they revolutionized that whole problem for the internet because that was something that developers did not want to go near, and they solved it. So they took on that hard task, and once they got it done, they had millions of users rapidly. And they're still one of the biggest companies that exists today, built in the last 20 years. Now, one filter that you have to turn off is thinking whether something will be big in the future. You absolutely can't tell this whether you like it or not. No one knows what the future is. And that's something that we'll leave to the VCs anyway. And they'll still get it wrong 9 out of 10 times. So there's no point turning on that filter. And another filter that you have to turn off is staying to one industry or one technology. So loads of people will want to make an AI startup in this age, but you don't want to limit yourself to that because you might have much better ideas lurking around the corner that just need you to work on different things. So just be observant of yourself and don't say no to potential ideas that aren't as trendy at the moment, but could be pretty good for yourself. So, PG gives some advice for uni students. When you're at uni, you have time to explore, and this exploration time is invaluable. So, if you're at uni, first of all, you have to build. Build what? Build anything. Build things that you think are cool that you would actually use. And that kind of thinking leads well to problem solving and actually creating good solutions in your own startup. But on top of that, when you try to make cool things, they often tend to be good startup ideas because they're things that everyone else has overlooked. They'll say that it's a gadget, they'll say it's a toy, but in reality, these cool technologies push the world further and they're pretty innovative. The second idea that you can implement if you're at university is clashing between domains. So most tech students want to work in internships at big tech and tech related jobs. But one thing that no one really considers are random fields like biotech. If you're at the intersection of biotech and software, you have an insight that not many other people will have. Trying to do that, taking classes in genetics, maybe working in these firms, might give you insights no one else is dreaming up, and you could have the upper lead in that scenario. The one thing that you definitely shouldn't do is take classes on business because it's just a waste of time. And I can tell you this from my experience, you don't really learn anything. It's kind of like trying to get big at the gym by watching gym YouTube videos. It doesn't work. No one's gonna lift that 100 kg, buddy. It has to be you. So, business classes, the same thing. Business is something you do, not write about. Now, if you're not at university, you kind of have to speed run the whole startup idea process. And luckily, there are tactics for it. Firstly, you can work in your area of expertise. That's the best strategy that you can do. Trying to jump into some other random field will not really do you quite well because you just won't know what works. Work with your strengths and see where it goes. Ask yourself, what problems have I faced at my industry? And also think about what kind of things do I wish people had built for me to make my life easier, to make my job easier. Now, the second tactic is talking to people and asking for their problems. And you just have to kind of be a therapist and consult and ask, oh, well, how are you really doing? And see what they say. Look for their problems and ask them about their day to day. But don't try too hard to shoehorn startup ideas out of their problems. See what is recurring and find the patterns and exploit them. The third tactic is the scary ones, the schlep ones. Schlep, if you don't remember, absolutely disgusting and hard problems that no one wants to tackle. Paul Graham actually recommends that you absolutely should do these if you're pivoting, if you're in YC. And that's because if you don't have time, just go for the absolutely most difficult problems that no one wants to do because those are probably things that are worth solving and are probably very profitable if loads of people need them. And that's about everything. Now, you don't have an excuse. You can't be saying, hey, I don't have a startup idea now. I just told you the formula, buddy. So get going, get building, and go and do some work. All right. Thanks.